The phone rang late in the evening, the kind of hour when a man my age should already be winding down, maybe watching the evening news or reading an old fishing magazine. But when I picked it up, it wasn't comfort or peace waiting for me. It was my daughter's voice, sharp, rushed, almost dismissive. "Dad, we're leaving tomorrow. Your beach house has already been sold."
Bye.
That was it. No warm hello, no hesitation, no ounce of respect for the years I carried her on my back. Just cold words, spoken like a stranger making a business call. For a moment, I sat there with the receiver pressed to my ear, unable to breathe. My heart clenched so tightly it felt like someone had reached inside my chest and twisted. I could almost hear the echoes of my late wife's laughter inside those walls, the sound of my children running down the hallways of that very beach house she had just declared gone. I forced myself to speak, though my throat was dry. "But you forgot one thing," I told her. There was silence on the other end. Then her voice came back, clipped and impatient. "What are you talking about?" I laughed. Not out of humor, but because the situation was so bitter, so absurd, that laughter was the only weapon left in that moment. She thought she had taken everything from me, but what she didn't know was that the beach house she had just sold wasn't what she believed it was. My name is Walter Briggs. I'm 71 years old, a retired dock worker from Wilmington, North Carolina. I've spent my entire life working for others, lifting, sweating, breaking my back on the docks for over 40 years. Every dollar I earned went straight into raising my kids, keeping the lights on, and building that little beach house with my own hands. I laid the first plank of wood, painted the siding myself, even carved my initials into the foundation before it dried. That house wasn't just property. It was me. My history. My family's story etched into every nail and board. And now my daughter, my own blood, had sold it like a trinket at a pawn shop. You might wonder how a father gets here. How a man who once carried his little girl on his shoulders while she giggled and tugged at his hair ends up betrayed in his old age by the very child he sacrificed for. I've asked myself that question more times than I can count. Maybe it starts when children grow up and forget. Or maybe it starts when they begin to see their parents not as heroes, but as burdens. My daughter's name is Lindsay. She's 38, married to a man named Carl who always struck me as slick, the kind of man who speaks with charm but carries emptiness behind the eyes. They live in Raleigh now, far from me, in a house I helped them afford by draining half of my retirement savings. Carl convinced her years ago that investing in bigger things meant moving away from the old ways.
And me?
I was part of the old ways. I raised Lindsay and her brother Matthew with every ounce of strength I had. When their mother, my wife Eleanor, passed away from cancer 15 years ago, I did everything in my power to keep our family from shattering. I never remarried. I thought my loyalty would mean something. I thought it would be remembered. But loyalty doesn't seem to matter much these days. What matters is convenience. And I, an old man with aching knees and a pension that barely covers my groceries, was no longer convenient. That phone call replayed in my head like a broken record. I couldn't shake the finality in her voice. She didn't say, "We're thinking of selling." She didn't ask, "Dad, how do you feel?" She said, "It's already been sold." Past tense. Done deal. But she didn't know. She didn't know that the house she thought she sold was something else entirely. Because years ago, when Eleanor was still alive, we made a decision. We placed the deed under a trust, one she never told the kids about. And in that trust was a clause, written in Eleanor's neat handwriting, that protected me no matter what. My children could think they owned it, but in truth, they never had the right to sell it without my signature. The irony made me chuckle bitterly into the receiver that night. My daughter thought she had stripped me bare. But she had no idea that the rug she tried to pull out from under me wasn't even hers to touch. Still, betrayal stings no matter how strong your defenses are. As I sat in my small living room, the dim glow of the lamp flickering against the wood-paneled walls, I felt the weight of loneliness press down on me. I pictured Eleanor's face in the photo frame across from me, her kind eyes, her soft smile. I whispered, "Can you believe this, Elle?" I half expected her to answer, to tell me it was going to be okay like she always did. But the silence was heavy. And for the first time in years, I realized I wasn't just losing a house. I was losing the last tether I had to my family. I stood up, paced the room, trying to calm the storm in my chest. My daughter's betrayal lit a fire I hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe it was anger, maybe it was survival, but something inside me woke up. Something told me this wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. The old Walter, the man who worked himself to the bone and smiled through pain for the sake of others, was gone. What stood in his place was a man who was ready to fight back. Not with fists, not with rage, but with quiet strength, with the kind of wisdom only age and heartbreak can give. I set the phone down slowly, the echo of Lindsay's voice still hanging in the air. "We're leaving tomorrow," she had said. She thought she could walk away clean, without consequences. She thought I was powerless, just an old man left to fade into the background. But she was wrong. She had forgotten one thing. And that one thing would change everything. The night grew darker outside, the waves of the Atlantic crashing against the shore not far from the house she thought she had stolen from me. I could hear them roaring through the cracked window, like nature itself was reminding me of my strength. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The night after that phone call, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the worn recliner in my living room, staring at the shadows dancing across the ceiling. Every creak in the house reminded me of Eleanor. Every memory clawed at my chest until it felt like I was suffocating. When you spend 71 years living for other people, betrayal doesn't just hurt, it crushes you. It strips away the meaning behind all those long hours, all those double shifts, all the nights you came home too tired to eat but still found the strength to kiss your children goodnight. As the clock ticked past midnight, I thought about how it all began. The story of my life, the story of this house, the story of my family, everything was tangled together like old fishing nets you can't separate without tearing something. I was 21 when I first laid eyes on Eleanor. She was a waitress in a small diner off Market Street in Wilmington. Her smile lit up that dingy little place like a sunrise. I was just a dockhand back then, young and hungry, working the ships unloading cargo in the heat of summer. I had nothing to offer her except calloused hands and a heart that beat too fast whenever she was near. But Eleanor saw something in me. She used to say, "Walter, you may not have much, but you've got the kind of strength no money can buy." We married 2 years later, and by the time I was 26, Lindsay was born. Matthew came 4 years after that. Life wasn't easy. The work on the docks broke my back and wore down my knees, but I never complained. I wanted my kids to have more than I ever did. While other men spent their paychecks at bars, I saved mine. Every dollar I could scrape together went into a small savings account Eleanor managed with pride. "This isn't for us," she'd say. "It's for the kids." When I turned 35, I started building the beach house. It wasn't fancy, just a small 2-story cottage near the shore, with white siding and a porch wide enough to hold 2 rocking chairs. Eleanor painted the shutters blue because she said the color reminded her of freedom. That house became our sanctuary. Summers were filled with barbecues, laughter, and the sound of our children playing in the sand. But then life shifted. Eleanor got sick. The cancer came fast, like a storm we never saw coming. I spent my savings on her treatments, and when the money ran out, I sold tools, borrowed from friends, and worked overtime shifts until my body gave out. Nothing mattered but keeping her alive. But no matter how much I fought, I couldn't stop the inevitable. Eleanor passed away 15 years ago in that very beach house, her hand in mine, her last words a whisper, "Protect them, Walt. Protect our family." I promised her I would. And that promise became the reason I created the trust. Before she died, we went to a lawyer in Wilmington, a kind man named Arthur Grant, who drafted the papers. We placed the deed to the beach house in a family trust with a clause that said it couldn't be sold without my consent while I was alive. Eleanor wanted me to be safe. She knew how the world could turn cold, even with your own blood. She didn't want me thrown out into the streets in my old age. Back then, I never imagined my own daughter would test that clause. Lindsay was a different child growing up. She had Eleanor's beauty but none of her patience. She was ambitious, always wanting more than what we had. I remember one Christmas when she was 15, she begged for a leather jacket the other girls at school wore. I told her we couldn't afford it, and she cried all night, calling me a failure. That memory stung more than any injury I ever got on the docks. Matthew was different. He was quiet, thoughtful, and he stayed by my side after Eleanor died. But Matthew had his demons too: drinking, gambling, running from responsibility. When he finally left town, I felt like I had lost both children in different ways. Years later, when Lindsay married Carl, I tried to welcome him into the family. He wore polished shoes, carried himself like a man with big plans. But beneath that slick smile, I sensed something hollow. He always asked questions about money, my pension, my savings, even the value of the beach house. He once told me, half joking, "Old properties like yours are gold mines waiting to be dug up." I didn't laugh. I never liked the way his eyes lingered on my house, like a wolf eyeing prey. Slowly, Lindsay drifted away from me. Calls became less frequent. Visits turned into obligations. She'd arrive, sit on the porch with her phone in hand, scrolling while I tried to tell her stories. Carl would whisper in her ear, and she'd look at me differently, as if I were just another bill to be paid, another obstacle in the way of her perfect suburban life. The last time she visited before that phone call, I noticed her walking around the house, snapping pictures on her phone. "What are you doing?" I asked. She smiled thinly and said, "Just capturing memories." But I knew better. Those weren't memories, those were listings. It was only a matter of time before the call came, the one where she told me the house was gone. As I sat in my chair that sleepless night, the pieces started to come together. Carl must have convinced her. Maybe they were drowning in debt, maybe they saw the beach house as their golden ticket. Either way, they thought I was powerless to stop them. But they had underestimated me. I rose from my chair, grabbed my coat, and stepped out into the night. The air was sharp with salt, the crash of waves steady in the distance. I walked down to the beach, my old bones protesting with every step, but my mind was sharper than it had been in years. I stood there, staring at the house, its silhouette against the moonlight like a soldier standing guard. "This house is mine, Elle," I whispered into the wind. "Ours. They'll never take it." I remembered the night Eleanor and I signed those trust papers. She had looked at me with tired eyes but strong will. "Promise me, Walter. Promise me they'll never push you aside. This house is your anchor. If the kids forget who you are, this place won't." I made that promise. And now, it was time to keep it. By dawn, I knew what I had to do. I pulled out the old lockbox from under my bed, the one Eleanor decorated with seashells we collected years ago. Inside were the documents, the trust, the deed, the clause that protected me. My hands shook as I touched them, not from weakness but from the weight of what they meant. This wasn't just paper. This was my weapon, my shield, my answer to Lindsay's betrayal. But I also knew something else. This wasn't just about legal papers. This was about respect. My daughter had crossed a line, and Carl had pulled her there. It wasn't enough to stop the sale. I needed to remind them who I was. Not just an old man they could discard, but the father who built their lives with his own 2 hands. I sat at the kitchen table, the documents spread out before me, and planned my next move. I would call Arthur Grant, the lawyer, first thing in the morning. I would make sure Lindsay's little scheme collapsed before it even left the ground. And then, I would face her. Not with anger, but with truth. As the sun broke over the horizon, lighting up the ocean with streaks of gold, I felt something I hadn't in years. Power. The kind that comes not from money or youth, but from knowing you hold the truth in your hands. Lindsay thought she had won. But she had forgotten one thing. And soon, she was about to learn it the hard way. The next morning, I woke to the sound of gulls screeching over the shoreline. For years, their cries had been background music to my mornings, but today they felt sharper, louder, like a warning call. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, the ache in my knees flaring up as always, but my mind was clear. The papers from the lockbox were still spread across the kitchen table. The trust, the deed, Eleanor's signature, proof that I was not powerless. I made myself coffee, the bitter taste grounding me. I stared out the window as the first light painted the ocean. Today, I would face Lindsay. Today, she would see that her father wasn't some feeble old man she could walk over. By 8 o'clock, I had Arthur Grant on the phone. His voice hadn't changed in all these years, steady and professional. "Walter," he said, "I wondered when I'd hear from you. I assume this is about the beach house." I tightened my grip on the receiver. "She told me it was sold, Arthur. My daughter. She thinks she can throw me out." There was a pause. Then Arthur chuckled softly, almost reassuringly. She can't sell what she doesn't own. Not without your consent. That clause your wife insisted on, that's ironclad. Lindsay doesn't have the legal authority. I'll draft a letter today, make it official. Relief washed over me, but it didn't erase the sting. Thank you, Arthur. But this isn't just about paperwork. I need to look her in the eye. I need her to understand what she's done. Be careful, Walter, Arthur warned. Sometimes people show their true colors when money's involved. You may not like what you see. I sighed. I already don't. By noon, I was driving toward Raleigh in my old Ford pickup. The engine rattled, the air conditioning barely worked, but it carried me forward like a soldier going to battle. The 2-hour drive gave me plenty of time to rehearse what I'd say, but when I finally pulled into their manicured driveway, every word disappeared from my mind. Lindsay's house was everything mine wasn't: big, modern, all clean lines and wide windows. A new SUV gleamed in the driveway. It screamed money, but I knew enough to see the cracks. People drowning in debt often polish the surface to hide the rot underneath. I knocked on the door, my stomach tight with a mix of dread and anger. After a moment, Lindsay appeared, dressed in a sharp blouse, her hair tied back neatly. For a split second, I saw my little girl again, the one who used to climb onto my lap with sticky hands and beg me to tell her stories about the sea. But the warmth in her eyes was gone. "Dad," she said, her voice flat, "what are you doing here?" "We need to talk," I replied. My tone was calm, steady. "Face to face." She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Fine. Come in." The inside of the house was spotless, almost cold. The smell of air freshener stung my nose. Carl was sitting at the dining table, his laptop open, a smirk curling across his face as he looked up. "Well, if it isn't the man of the hour," Carl said, leaning back in his chair. "Walter, we were just talking about you." "I'll bet you were," I said. My eyes locked on Lindsay. "You told me you sold the beach house." She crossed her arms. "We did. It was the smart thing to do, Dad. That place is old, falling apart. You can't take care of it anymore. This way, you can finally move into a retirement community where you'll be safe." "Safe," I repeated, my voice rising. "You think selling the only home your mother and I built together is keeping me safe? You think tossing me aside like an old shoe is what Eleanor wanted?" Her eyes flickered at the mention of her mother, but Carl jumped in before she could answer. "Walter, come on. It's not like that. We're looking out for you. We got a great price for the house. More than it's worth. That money can go a long way for you." I reached into my coat and pulled out the folded papers. I laid them on the table with a deliberate hand. "You didn't sell anything. This deed, this trust, says you don't own that house." "I do. You can't touch it without my consent. And you'll never get it." The room went silent. Lindsay's face paled. Carl's smirk faltered, but only for a moment. Then he leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "You think a piece of paper is going to stop us," he said softly. "Everything has a loophole, Walter. Everything." I locked eyes with him. "Not this. Your mother-in-law made sure of it. And even if there was a loophole, you'd have to get through me first." For the first time, Lindsay's composure cracked. "Dad, why are you making this so hard? We're just trying to help you. You can't live out there by yourself forever. You're old. You need us." "Need you?" I laughed bitterly. "Where were you when I needed you? When your mother was dying, when I worked my body into the ground to pay for your college, when I gave you the down payment for this house? Where were you then? You didn't need me then, did you? And now, suddenly, you're concerned about my well-being? No, Lindsay. This isn't about helping me. This is about helping yourselves." Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. Carl, however, wasn't done. He closed his laptop with a snap and stood up. "Walter, listen. You can make this easy, or you can make this hard. Maybe the trust says we can't sell it without you, but you can't stop what's coming. That property is valuable, and someone will get it sooner or later. Think about your age. Think about how tired you are. Wouldn't it be easier to let go now and have peace?" I stepped closer, my voice low but steady. "You don't know me, Carl. You don't know the years I've endured, the storms I've weathered, the promises I've kept. You think I'm tired? Maybe. But I'll fight for that house with my last breath. Not because it's worth money, but because it's worth something far greater. It's worth my wife's memory. It's worth my life's work. And I'll be damned if I let you erase that." Lindsay's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly wiped them away, as if showing weakness in front of Carl wasn't allowed. She whispered, "Dad, please." I shook my head. "No, Lindsay. Please nothing. This ends now." I gathered the papers and slid them back into my coat. "If you try to go through with this again, you won't just lose the house. You'll lose me too." The words hung heavy in the room. For a moment, I thought I saw regret flash across her face. But Carl's hand tightened on her shoulder, and whatever softness was there hardened again. I turned to leave, but before I reached the door, Carl spoke one last time. "You can walk away today, Walter. But know this, we're not done. That house will be ours. One way or another." I paused, hand on the doorknob, then looked back at him with a cold smile. "You forgot one thing, Carl. You're playing checkers. I'm playing chess." I walked out into the afternoon sun, my heart pounding. The battle lines had been drawn. My daughter had chosen her side. And now it was war. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't see, was that I had more than just a trust on my side. I had Eleanor's words in my heart, and a plan forming in my mind. A plan they would never see coming. When I drove back home from Raleigh that evening, the sun was already dipping low, painting the highway in shades of orange and purple. My old Ford rattled along, but my mind was sharper than it had been in years. Carl thought he had cornered me, but he didn't understand. I wasn't some helpless old man waiting for the end. I was Walter Briggs. I had weathered storms stronger than his greed. The beach house came into view just as the last rays of daylight faded. Its white siding glowed faintly under the moonlight. The blue shutters Eleanor had painted still clinging to life despite years of salt and wind. I parked the truck, stepped out, and stood in the sand for a long time, letting the waves wash over my boots. This house wasn't just wood and nails. It was memory, promise, blood. And if I had to protect it alone, then so be it. But I wasn't going to fight this battle with anger. I would fight it with patience. With strategy. Quiet revenge. The next morning, I called Arthur Grant again. "Arthur," I said, "I want to do more than stop them. I want to make sure they can never try this again." His tone was thoughtful. "You want to fortify the trust." "Exactly. If they think they can wear me down, they're wrong. I need something stronger, something that makes the house untouchable." Arthur agreed to meet me later that week. He promised he would draft new protections, tightening the trust, updating the will, ensuring that Carl's hands could never touch my legacy. But I knew paperwork alone wasn't enough. Carl was clever. He'd find ways to circle back, to manipulate Lindsay, to pressure me. No, this needed more than legal documents. It needed foresight. So I began to plan. For days, I walked the beach with a notebook tucked under my arm. The salty air filled my lungs, clearing the fog of betrayal and replacing it with purpose. I wrote down every option, every idea. Sell the house myself? No, too final. Rent it out? Possibly, but risky. Then another idea struck me. What if I gave the house a new purpose? Something larger than myself. Something no one could touch. Eleanor's voice echoed in my head. "Protect them, Walt. Protect our family." That night, I dug out an old photo album from the closet. Inside were pictures of Eleanor hosting church gatherings on the porch, of neighborhood children playing in the yard, of barbecues that brought half the community together. This house had always been more than just mine. It belonged to the memories of everyone who had ever stepped foot here. And then the thought crystallized. A foundation. A retreat. A place dedicated to Eleanor's memory, for the community she loved. If the house became a foundation property, not just a personal asset, it would be untouchable. I smiled for the first time in days. Quiet revenge wasn't about destroying my daughter or punishing Carl. It was about building something greater than their greed could ever reach. But first, I had to draw them out. The call came 3 days later. Lindsay again. Her voice was sharp, but I could hear the cracks now. Dad, we need to talk. Carl found another buyer. Someone who's willing to pay cash. This deal is too good to pass up. I let the silence hang for a moment, then spoke evenly. Lindsay, I told you. You don't own that house. You never did. But if you want to talk, fine. Come down here. Both of you. We'll talk face to face. She hesitated. Fine. Tomorrow. The next day, I waited on the porch as their SUV pulled into the sandy driveway. Carl stepped out first, sunglasses on, his grin wide. Lindsay followed, her eyes avoiding mine. They walked up the porch steps like conquerors arriving at enemy territory. Walter, Carl said, his voice dripping with fake charm, we've got a fantastic opportunity here. This buyer is ready to pay top dollar. All you need to do is sign off. It's a win-win. I leaned back in my rocking chair, arms crossed. Is that so? Yes, Carl continued, his confidence swelling. Think about it. You'll get more money than you've ever had. You can move into a comfortable community, no worries, no upkeep. We'll handle everything. Doesn't that sound like a relief? I stared at him for a long moment, then turned my gaze to Lindsay. Does it sound like a relief to you, Lindsay? Selling the last thing your mother left behind. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Dad, Mom wouldn't want you struggling. She'd want you to be safe. Don't you dare speak for her, I said, my voice sharp enough to make her flinch. You don't know what she wanted. She wanted me to protect this family. She wanted me to protect this house. And that's exactly what I'm doing. Carl sighed, stepping closer. Walter, don't make this difficult. You're old. You're tired. Don't you want to make things easier for yourself? I leaned forward, my eyes narrowing. You know what's funny, Carl? You keep telling me how tired I am. But you look more desperate every time I see you. Makes me wonder, who's really struggling here? For the first time, his grin faltered. Just for a second. And that was all I needed. I stood up slowly, towering over him despite the stiffness in my knees. Listen to me carefully. This house is not for sale. Not now, not ever. And if you try to push me again, you'll regret it. Carl's eyes hardened. You're making a mistake. No, I said firmly. You are. Lindsay tugged at his arm, whispering something, and they stormed off the porch, frustration radiating from every step. Their SUV roared down the sandy road, leaving a cloud of dust in their wake. I sat back down, the ocean wind cooling my face. The first move had been made. They knew I wasn't backing down. And now, it was time to make sure they could never come back. That evening, I called Arthur again. Arthur, I said, let's move forward with the foundation idea. I want the house transferred into a charitable trust, in Eleanor's name. It'll be a retreat for families, for widows, for anyone who needs peace. Something good. Something lasting. Arthur was quiet for a moment, then said, Walter, that's a brilliant move. Once it's under the foundation, no one, not even your children, can touch it. Good, I said. Because Carl will keep trying. But this time, he won't find a way in. As I hung up, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't just defending myself. I was building something. But I also knew Carl wouldn't take defeat quietly. He was too greedy, too proud. He'd dig. He'd scheme. And when he discovered what I was doing, he'd strike harder than before. I looked out at the ocean, the waves crashing against the shore with unrelenting force. Quiet revenge wasn't about shouting or fighting. It was about standing firm, like the tide, wearing down everything in its path. And when Carl came back, as I knew he would, I'd be ready. The days after Carl and Lindsay stormed off were quiet, but it wasn't the kind of peace you trust. It was the silence before a storm, the air so still it makes the hairs on your arms stand up. I knew Carl wasn't finished. Men like him never walk away. They circle back, like sharks that smell blood in the water. I spent those quiet days preparing. Arthur worked quickly, drafting the papers for the Eleanor Briggs Foundation. Soon the beach house would be untouchable, transformed into a charitable retreat that no greedy hands could reach. I'd already spoken to members of the community, old church friends, neighbors who remembered Eleanor. They were excited about the idea. Some even offered to volunteer once it became official. That gave me hope. But I knew Carl. Hope alone wouldn't stop him. Sure enough, a week later, trouble came knocking. Literally. I was sitting on the porch in my rocking chair, sipping coffee, when a black sedan pulled into the sandy driveway. Two men in suits stepped out, carrying clipboards and briefcases. They didn't belong on my beach road, and they sure didn't belong on my porch. "Mr. Briggs?" one of them asked. His voice was sharp, businesslike. "We're here on behalf of Apex Real Estate Group. We've been informed you're residing in a property currently under sale negotiations. We'd like to discuss options for relocation." Relocation. The word twisted in my gut. Carl had sent them. I stood, gripping my cane, and fixed them with the kind of stare that makes younger men shift uncomfortably. "This property isn't for sale. Not now, not ever. You can tell Carl Turner to stop sending his wolves to my door." The men exchanged glances. One of them cleared his throat. "Sir, you don't seem to understand. Deals like this—" "I understand perfectly," I cut in. "And you can turn around and leave before I call the sheriff." They hesitated, then retreated, muttering under their breath as they climbed back into the sedan. The car disappeared down the road, leaving tire marks in the sand. I sat back down, my hands trembling, not from fear, but from rage. Carl was escalating. He wasn't just whispering in Lindsay's ear anymore. He was sending strangers to intimidate me. That night, I called Lindsay. She answered on the third ring. "Dad," she said, her voice tired, "why are men in suits showing up at my house?" I demanded. "Why is Carl sending real estate agents to threaten me?" There was a pause. Then she sighed. "I didn't know he was doing that. Carl just wants what's best. He thinks you're being stubborn." Stubborn? I nearly shouted. "Lindsay, I built this house with my bare hands. Your mother died here. And you're siding with him over me? Over your own father?" Her voice cracked. "Dad, please. I don't want to fight." "Then stop fighting me," I said, softer now. "Stop letting him turn you against me." But before she could answer, I heard Carl's voice in the background. Sharp. Controlling. "Hang up, Lindsay. Don't waste your breath." And just like that, the line went dead. I sat there in the dark, phone still pressed to my ear, heart heavy. For the first time, I wondered if I had already lost her completely. But the next morning, something happened that gave me a flicker of hope. Lindsay showed up alone. No Carl. Just her, standing in the driveway, her arms wrapped around herself as if she were shielding against the ocean wind. "Dad," she said quietly when I opened the door. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside, cautious but curious. She sat at the kitchen table, her eyes scanning the familiar walls. For a moment, I saw the girl who used to sit there with Eleanor, coloring with crayons while I read the paper. "I didn't know Carl sent those men," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want it to go this far. Yet here we are," I replied. She looked down at her hands. "You don't understand, Dad. Carl has debts. Business deals that went bad. He's desperate. He thinks selling this house will fix everything." "And you?" I asked. "Do you think that?" Tears filled her eyes. "I don't know what to think anymore." I leaned forward. "Then listen to me. This house isn't just a building. It's your mother's memory. It's everything I worked for. And if you let him take it, you'll lose more than a house. You'll lose me. Forever." Her shoulders shook, but she nodded faintly. For the first time, I saw doubt breaking through Carl's hold on her. But hope is fragile. It lasts only until the next storm rolls in. That storm came 3 days later. I was in town picking up groceries when Sheriff Donnelly, an old friend of mine, waved me over. His face was tight, his voice low. "Walter," he said, "you need to know something. Carl's been talking to folks around here. He's spreading rumors, saying you're losing your mind, that you're not fit to live alone. He's trying to build a case to have you declared incompetent." The ground seemed to shift beneath me. "What?" Donnelly nodded grimly. "If he convinces enough people, he could petition the court for guardianship. If that happens, he could gain control over your assets, including this house." I gripped the edge of my cart to steady myself. Guardianship. The word tasted like poison. Carl wasn't just trying to steal the house. He was trying to steal my very life. "Thanks for telling me, Donnelly," I said. My voice shook, but my resolve hardened. He won't win. Not this time. When I got home, I pulled out the trust papers again, holding them like a shield. Carl thought he could paint me as weak, as incompetent. But I wasn't. I was sharper now than I'd been in years. And if he wanted a war, I'd give him one. That night, as the waves crashed against the shore, I sat on the porch with Eleanor's picture in my lap. "He wants to break me, Elle," I whispered. "But he doesn't know me. He doesn't know us." I looked out at the moonlit ocean, my fists clenched. If he wants to fight, then let him. I'm ready. Because Carl Turner had just crossed a line. And Walter Briggs wasn't about to go quietly. The letter came on a Monday morning. I had just brewed my coffee and settled into my chair by the window, the sunlight stretching across the hardwood floor, when I saw the envelope. It was thick, official, with my name typed in black ink. My stomach sank before I even opened it. Inside were papers stamped with the seal of the county court. Words leapt off the page like fire: petition for guardianship. Carl had gone through with it. He was trying to strip me of my independence, claiming I was no longer capable of making decisions for myself. If the court agreed, he wouldn't just get access to my house. He'd control my bank accounts, my pension, even my medical decisions. I'd be a prisoner in my own life. For a moment, the room spun. My hands shook so badly the papers slipped onto the floor. I pressed my palms against my knees, forcing my breath steady. No. I would not let this happen. I picked up the phone and called Arthur, my lawyer. Within an hour, he was sitting at my kitchen table, reading through the documents with his glasses low on his nose. His face darkened with every page. "He's ruthless," Arthur muttered. "This is low, even for him. He's claiming you've shown signs of memory loss, confusion, even paranoia. He's got people lined up to testify, neighbors, maybe even doctors he's convinced." "I'm not incompetent," I said firmly. Arthur looked up, meeting my eyes. "I know. But in cases like this, perception matters more than truth. Carl's building a story, and if the judge believes it, you could lose everything." I leaned back in my chair, fists clenched. "So what do we do?" Arthur set the papers down. "We fight. We'll need evidence, witnesses who can vouch for your state of mind, proof that you've been handling your affairs just fine. And Walter, we'll need you at your sharpest. No anger, no outbursts. You have to show the court you're the steady one, not him." The date was set, 3 weeks from now. 3 weeks to prepare for the most important battle of my life. Word spread fast. By the next Sunday at church, whispers followed me down the aisle. Some folks smiled warmly, offering quiet encouragement. Others averted their eyes, already half believing Carl's lies. Small towns are like that. Rumors grow faster than truth. But there were still allies. Pastor Green stopped me after service, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Walter, I know you. I've seen your mind, your heart. If you need me to speak in your defense, I will." That gave me strength. The weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Arthur drilled me with questions, making sure I was ready for whatever tricks Carl's lawyer might pull. My friend Donnelly, the sheriff, agreed to testify about my independence and clear judgment. And little by little, I gathered support. People who remembered me fixing roofs, organizing food drives, running the fishing club. People who knew Walter Briggs wasn't a man lost to confusion. But beneath the surface, fear gnawed at me. Not fear of losing the house, though that mattered more than anything, but fear of losing Lindsay forever. One evening, a few days before the hearing, Lindsay came to see me again. This time she looked different, tired, worn down, as if the weight of Carl's schemes was finally pressing too hard. "Dad," she said quietly, standing in the doorway. "I don't know what to do anymore." I gestured for her to sit. She sank into the chair across from me, her hands twisting in her lap. "Carl says you're slipping," she whispered. "That you can't manage on your own. He says the guardianship is for your safety." I let out a sharp laugh, though there was no humor in it. "My safety? Lindsay, I've managed alone for years. I cook my meals, I pay my bills, I drive myself to town. Do I look unsafe to you?" Her eyes welled with tears. "No, you don't. But Carl, he's so convincing. He talks like he's just trying to protect you." I reached across the table, taking her hand in mine. "He's not protecting me, Lindsay. He's protecting himself. He sees this house as a solution to his debts, and he'll tear apart our family to get it. You have to see that." She looked away, torn. I could see the battle raging inside her. "Lindsay," I said softly, "when you were little, your mother and I used to sit on this porch with you between us. Do you remember? She'd braid your hair while I told you stories about the sea. This house isn't just wood and nails. It's where we built our lives. If you let Carl take it, you're letting him erase her." Her shoulders shook as she cried quietly. She didn't answer, but she didn't pull her hand away either. And in that silence, I saw a crack widening in Carl's grip on her. The day of the hearing arrived like a storm breaking. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and paper. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair, sat high above us, her eyes sharp and unreadable. Carl was there, of course, dressed in a suit that looked too expensive for a man drowning in debt. He smirked when he saw me, a smile that said he thought he'd already won. Lindsay sat beside him, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Arthur leaned close to me. "Remember, calm, clear, steady. Let Carl dig his own grave." Carl's lawyer opened with a speech dripping in false concern. "Your Honor, we're here today because Mr. Briggs is no longer capable of safely managing his affairs. He's isolated, confused, vulnerable. My client, Mr. Turner, simply wants to ensure his father-in-law receives the care he needs." I bit my tongue, forcing myself to stay still as they painted me like a helpless old man. Then Carl took the stand. He spoke with rehearsed sorrow, shaking his head as if this pained him. "Walter's not the man he used to be. He forgets things. He gets angry, paranoid. I've seen him leave the stove on, misplace important papers. Lindsay and I are worried he might hurt himself." "Lies. Every word a lie." Arthur rose slowly, his voice calm. "Mr. Turner, do you have any actual medical diagnosis to support these claims?" Carl shifted. "Well, no, but—" Arthur pressed. "Any documented incidents? Police reports? Doctor's notes?" Carl's jaw tightened. "Not yet. But it's obvious." "Obvious to you," Arthur interrupted smoothly. "But not to anyone else." The judge's eyebrow arched slightly, though she remained silent. Then it was my turn. I took the stand, hand steady, voice clear. Arthur asked me simple questions, about my daily routine, how I managed my bills, how I maintained the house. I answered each one without hesitation, making sure to look the judge in the eye. Finally, Arthur asked, "Mr. Briggs, can you tell the court what this house means to you?" I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "This house is my wife, Eleanor. It's where we raised our daughter. It's where every memory of our life together lives. Losing it wouldn't just be losing a house. It would be losing her. And I'm not ready to let that go." The courtroom was silent. Even Lindsay's eyes shimmered with tears. But Carl wasn't done. He leaned forward, his voice sharp. "He's manipulating you, Your Honor. Can't you see? This is exactly what I'm talking about. He's obsessed, clinging to the past, refusing to face reality. He's not stable." The judge raised a hand. "Enough, Mr. Turner." Carl sat back, fuming. The hearing stretched on, witnesses called on both sides. Sheriff Donnelly testified firmly that I was in full control of my life. Pastor Green spoke about my leadership in the community. Each voice chipped away at Carl's story. But the fight was far from over. When the judge finally adjourned for the day, She announced she would need more time to review the evidence before making a decision. As we left the courtroom, Carl brushed past me, his voice low and venomous. "This isn't over, old man. You think you've won, but I've got cards you don't even know about." I didn't flinch. I just looked him in the eye and said, "Then play them. I'm ready." But as I walked out into the fading afternoon light, I couldn't shake the unease settling in my chest. Because Carl's threats weren't empty. He always had another move. And I had the sinking feeling the next one would hit closer to home than ever before. The week after the hearing felt like walking on broken glass. Every step I took carried the weight of Carl's threat, those words he hissed in my ear before storming out of the courthouse. "I've got cards you don't even know about." He meant it. I knew him well enough by now. Carl Turner was the kind of man who wouldn't rest until he had crushed me. And when men like him run out of legal maneuvers, they turn to darker tactics. It started small. Phone calls in the middle of the night, hang-ups that left me staring at the dark ceiling, my pulse racing. Strange cars idling near the driveway before speeding off when I stepped outside. Mail going missing, neighbors whispering about old Walter losing it. It was a smear campaign, the kind designed to chip away at both my reputation and my sanity. But then came the blow I didn't see coming. One chilly morning, I drove into town for groceries. As I pushed my cart past the bakery aisle, I felt eyes on me. Whispers rose behind me like buzzing flies. When I reached the cashier, she avoided my gaze, sliding the items across the scanner in silence. "What's going on?" I asked finally. She bit her lip. "I'm sorry, Mr. Briggs. It's just, people are saying things." My heart sank. What kind of things? She leaned closer, her voice low. "That you hit your daughter once. That you used to lose your temper with her and Eleanor. That you weren't the good family man everyone thought." The room spun. My hands gripped the cart to steady myself. Lies. Filthy, vicious lies. I drove straight home, anger boiling inside me. That night, I got the answer to who was behind it. Lindsay came over, her face pale. She barely sat down before blurting, "Dad, Carl told people you used to abuse us." The words nearly stopped my heart. "What?" She nodded, tears in her eyes. "He's telling anyone who will listen. That you yelled at me growing up, that Mom was scared of you. Dad, people believe him." I pushed back from the table, my chair scraping the floor. "That's a lie. I never laid a hand on either of you. Never." "I know," she whispered. "But he's spreading it everywhere. He says he has proof." "Proof?" My voice cracked with disbelief. "What proof?" She hesitated, then pulled out her phone. "He showed me a photo. An old picture of me with a bruise on my arm. He says it's from you." I shook my head violently. "That was from when you fell off your bike. You were 9 years old. You scraped your elbow and bruised your arm. I carried you home myself." Her eyes brimmed with tears. "I remember now." But Carl twisted it. And for a moment, I believed him. That cut deeper than any lie Carl had told. For a moment, my own daughter had doubted me. I walked to the window, staring out at the ocean crashing against the shore. The waves roared, wild and relentless, as if echoing the storm inside me. "Dad," Lindsay said softly, "I don't know what to do. Carl keeps telling me you're dangerous, unstable. But then I come here and you're just you. I don't know who to believe anymore." I turned to her, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. "Believe the man who raised you. Believe the man who stayed up nights fixing your science projects, who worked double shifts so you could go to college, who sat in the hospital holding your hand when you broke your leg. That's me, Lindsay. That's who I am." She broke then, covering her face with her hands, sobbing into them. I wanted to hold her, but I didn't move. Not yet. Because even in her tears, I saw it. Carl's hold was cracking. But Carl wasn't finished. His darkest card hadn't been played yet. 3 nights later, I was jolted awake by pounding on the door. Red and blue lights flashed through the window. My stomach dropped as I shuffled to the porch. 2 officers stood there, grim-faced. "Walter Briggs?" one asked. "Yes," I said slowly. You're under investigation for allegations of domestic abuse. We'll need you to come with us for questioning." The world tilted. "What?" The officer's eyes were steady, but not unkind. "We have to follow procedure, sir. A formal complaint's been filed." And just like that, Carl had gone from lies whispered in town to official accusations. At the station, they asked questions, cold, clinical questions that cut into me like knives. Had I ever struck Eleanor? Had I ever yelled at Lindsay? Had neighbors ever heard shouting? I answered calmly, truthfully, but each question felt like a slap. My life's legacy, the man I had been for 71 years, was being twisted into something monstrous. When I was finally released, I walked out into the cold night air, hollow inside. Carl had gone too far this time. He wasn't just trying to take my house. He was trying to erase me. Back home, I sat on the porch until dawn, staring at the horizon. The house loomed behind me, silent witness to everything. Eleanor's memory hung in the salt air, urging me to hold on, to fight. But for the first time, I wondered if I had the strength left. The next day, Lindsay came again. Her eyes were red, her hands shaking. She dropped onto the porch steps beside me. "Dad," she whispered, "Carl made me sign the complaint. He pressured me. Said if I didn't, he'd walk out on me. He said I had to choose between him and you." Her words struck like thunder. My chest ached, not just with betrayal but with sorrow for the trap she was caught in. "And you chose him," I said quietly. She buried her face in her hands. "I'm sorry. I thought I was doing the right thing. But now I don't know. I think I made a mistake." I closed my eyes, breathing deep. "It's not too late, Lindsay. But you have to decide, who do you stand with? The man who raised you, or the man who's trying to destroy me?" She didn't answer right away. But when she finally looked at me, there was something new in her eyes. Not fear. Not confusion. Determination. "Dad," she said, "I want to fix this. I want to help you stop him." For the first time in months, hope stirred in my chest. But hope was fragile. Because at that very moment, Carl was preparing his final strike, a move so ruthless it would shake not only my life, but Lindsay's as well. And when it landed, the world we knew would come crashing down. Carl's final strike came sooner than I expected. 2 days after Lindsay broke down on my porch, I received another letter, this one heavier, darker in tone. Inside was a notice of foreclosure. My heart pounded as I scanned the words. According to the letter, someone had taken out a mortgage on the beach house in my name. Missed payments had triggered repossession. The bank was preparing to seize the property. It was Carl. It had to be Carl. He'd forged papers, twisted signatures, and pulled strings to drag me into the one trap he thought I couldn't escape: debt. For a moment, the walls seemed to close in around me. The house, Eleanor's laughter in these walls, the years of sweat I had poured into it, all slipping away because of one man's greed. But then something in me shifted. I'd spent too long letting Carl dictate the battle. It was time I dictated the ending. I called Arthur. "It's time," I told him. "Let's make the foundation official." He hesitated. "Walter, if the foreclosure is real—" "It won't matter," I interrupted. "Because by the time Carl thinks he's won, the house won't be mine to take. It'll belong to something bigger. To Eleanor. To the community." Arthur paused, then slowly said, "All right. Let's do it." That night, Lindsay came over again, her face pale from worry. She had finally seen Carl for who he was. "Dad," she whispered, "Carl's planning something worse. He says if the courts don't take the house, the bank will. He's bragging about it to his friends." I handed her the papers Arthur and I had signed just hours before. "Let him brag. Because tomorrow, this house won't be Briggs' property anymore. It'll belong to the Eleanor Briggs Foundation." Her eyes widened. "A foundation?" I nodded. "A retreat for veterans, widows, and families in need. The house will never be sold. Not by me, not by anyone. It'll outlive Carl, it'll outlive me, and you'll never have to worry about his schemes again." She covered her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Dad, I don't deserve your forgiveness after everything. I pulled her close. You're my daughter. That's enough. The next morning, we went back to court. Carl strutted in, his lawyer at his side, smug as ever. He was ready to unveil his forged foreclosure papers, certain this would be the blow to crush me. But when the judge asked if I had anything to present before ruling, I stood tall and handed her the new deed. Your Honor, I said, my voice steady, as of yesterday, the beach house is no longer my personal property. It has been legally transferred into the Eleanor Briggs Foundation, a registered non-profit trust. This home is now dedicated to serving the community and honoring my late wife's memory. It cannot be bought, sold, or mortgaged. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Carl's smug smile faltered. The judge examined the papers, her expression unreadable. Finally, she looked up. These documents are valid. Mr. Turner, your petition for guardianship and your foreclosure claim are both irrelevant. This property no longer belongs to Mr. Briggs, it belongs to the Foundation. Case dismissed. Carl shot to his feet, his face red with rage. You can't do this. That house is mine. It was supposed to be mine. The judge's gavel cracked against the wood. Sit down, Mr. Turner. You are dismissed from this court. Carl's voice rose, wild and desperate. You'll regret this, old man. I'll find another way. But the bailiff stepped forward, forcing him back. His own lawyer looked disgusted, packing his briefcase without a word. And in that moment, I saw Carl Turner for what he truly was. Not a mastermind, not a man in control, but a desperate gambler who had finally lost everything. When court adjourned, Lindsay slipped her arm through mine. I'm so sorry, Dad, she whispered. I squeezed her hand. You opened your eyes, and that's what matters. Outside the courthouse, the autumn air smelled sharp and clean. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. Weeks later, the Foundation opened its doors. The beach house was alive with laughter and purpose once more. Veterans sat on the porch swapping stories, children ran barefoot through the sand, and widows gathered in the kitchen sharing meals. Eleanor's spirit filled every corner. One evening, I stood at the shoreline, watching the sun sink into the ocean. Lindsay joined me, her eyes soft. You won, Dad, she said quietly. I shook my head. No. We won. Your mother won. This house will stand long after I'm gone, and no one, not Carl, not anyone, can change that. She leaned her head on my shoulder. For the first time since Eleanor's passing, I felt whole again. As the waves crashed against the shore, I whispered into the wind, We did it, Elle. They tried to take it all, but in the end, we kept it. For you. For them. Forever. And for the first time in a long time, I laughed. Not the bitter laugh Carl once heard on the phone, but a laugh of peace, of triumph. Because in the end, Walter Briggs didn't just survive. He won. Thank you for listening to Walter's Journey. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. It helps bring more powerful stories like this to life. Stay tuned for the next one. And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story.